Welcome in everyone, this is Jordan with Ravens Flash Report, and last year when I started this channel, my first few videos were centered around my offensive projections for the Ravens wide receivers, tight ends, and running backs. Now, as with many things when first starting out, I don't think those first few videos were as good as they could have been, so in this video I'm going to try to improve on that idea. Instead of simply throwing out optimistic numbers for what I hope the players would achieve, I'm diving into the numbers of the players' careers and how the Ravens as a team have done in recent history. So while the premise of this video will be the same as I attempt to predict how many reception yards and touchdowns each player will have, the way in which I'm approaching the video and my reasoning for these projections will be, hopefully, a more accurate representation than last year's. Just like with last year's video, all of these projections are based on a fully healthy 17-game season for each player, as injuries are impossible to predict. With all that said, let's get to it. In this video, I'm going to be covering just the wide receivers, as there's plenty to talk about with this position group and the expectations we have as fans for them this season. The tight end video will come out next and will probably be a little bit shorter than this one, but still more involved than last year, as we really have to take into account how Andrews and Likely will be used in tandem. The running back video will follow that. I would have liked to put all three groups into one video, but as I stated earlier, I'm going to be attempting to make this as accurate as possible, and if I put them all in one video, it's going to be well over 30 minutes. So, for the running back video in particular, last year I don't think I gave Lamar Jackson's effect on the run game as much credit and gravity as I should have. The type of offense that the Ravens run, along with Lamar Jackson's abilities and impact on the running game, is something that I simply cannot overlook, so look for those videos in the next few days. But let's start this video off with Zay Flowers, who last year became the wide receiver that Lamar has targeted the most in any season of his career. Last year, Zay led the team in targets with 108, receptions with 77, and receiving yards with 858, while being tied for second on the team in touchdowns with 5. Not knowing how Zay would do as a rookie, last year I projected him to have between 50 and 60 receptions, between 500 and 600 yards, and 4 to 6 touchdowns, but at least I got the touchdowns right. With 1 year of data to look at, I can't do a deep dive on Zay's receiving history with the team. However, based on what we see from Lamar each season with regard to his top receiver, I think Zay will produce somewhat similar numbers to last season, if not a bit more. Overall, through 17 games, I project between 110 to 120 targets, 80 to 90 receptions, just over 1,000 yards, and around 5 to 7 touchdowns. Zay's usage and skill set will still be used in the same way during Moken's second year, and while his targets, receptions, and yards will go up, his touchdown ceiling isn't really something that I can see increasing, as we have bigger red zone targets like Andrews and Likely available. Zay's game is in the open field, where he has space to move and use his incredible agility and speed to make people miss for extra yardage. He is an excellent chain mover and will continue to excel as Lamar's number one receiving option for a second year in a row. Our number 2 receiver is Rashod Bateman, and while he's been on the team for 3 years, he feels even more of an unknown than Zay after only 1 year. The problem with Bateman's offensive production is that what he is believed to be capable of and what he has actually produced on the field differ about as much as possible. Last year, I thought Bateman would thrive in this new offense. I had him getting between 75 and 80 receptions, 800 to 900 yards, and 7 to 9 touchdowns. Basically what Zay got, but with more touchdowns. Instead, Bateman through 16 games ended up with 32 receptions on 56 targets for 367 yards and 1 touchdown. While Bateman in 2023 was the healthiest and most available he's been in his career so far, there were several factors that I believe led to this underperformance. 1. Only playing in 10 full games with Lamar under center before the start of the 2023 season, having significant effects on their chemistry and timing. 2. Only playing in 17 games between 2021 and the 2022 season, and seemingly constantly dealing with some lower body injury that impacted Bateman's ability to train and maintain his skills at a high level. And 3. There was simply more competition for the available targets this year than in any year Bateman had been in on the team. Before 2023, the only players that saw more targets than Bateman were Mark Andrews, Hollywood Brown, and Devin Duvernay. During 2023, he was out-targeted by Andrews, Flowers, and OBJ, with Nelson Agholor behind him only by 11, but having more receptions, yards, and touchdowns than him. Now, Rashod Bateman is the wide receiver that I see as having the most to prove this year in Todd Monken's offense with OBJ gone. The expectations for Bateman this year are to not only step up into the number 2 role, but also get more targets as he's going to be relied upon more. Even with all that in mind, I believe I was too optimistic for Bateman last year, and while he may see some increase in usage, I don't predict a massive jump in some of these numbers. This year, I project Bateman to see 60 to 70 targets, 45 to 55 receptions, for around 500 to 600 yards and between 3 and 4 touchdowns. I know this may seem underwhelming, but even with the expectations on his role increasing, there are other players who are expected to see an increase as well, such as Isaiah Likely. Moving on to our supposed number 3 wide receiver, Nelson Agholor, who last year proved to be an incredible asset to the offense in 2023 and a reliable target for Lamar in the red zone. Last year, I had Agholor seeing between 30 to 40 receptions for 300 to 500 yards and a few touchdowns. I was a little more vague with Nelson and Devin Duvernay, as they were projected to be the 4th and 5th receiver and their usage was less predictable. However, looking at Agholor's career and where his numbers are trending based on the last 4 years, it's clear that we will see a slight decline if his current trajectory holds true. Since 2020, Agholor saw 82, 64, 53, and 45 targets in each season. His receptions for each of those years were 48, 37, 31, and 35, for 896, 473, 362, and 381 yards, respectively. He also had a similar pattern with his touchdowns, with 8, 3, 2, and 4 in each year. Taking all this into consideration for Agholor's offensive projection as the number 3 wide receiver, I would say he's in line for around 40 to 50 targets, 25 to 35 receptions, 300 to 400 yards, and 2 to 4 touchdowns. Still a solid target for Lamar as the most experienced member of this receiving corps, and with another season under his belt with Lamar as his quarterback, their connection should continue to prove a valuable and productive one for the Ravens. The last wide receiver I'm going to cover is rookie Devontez Walker. Now, as a rookie, there's even less data for me to draw on to create this projection, but using what we know of how Lamar disperses the ball to his receivers who aren't his number 1, we can put together a pretty accurate idea of his usage. Since 2019, the 4th receiver on the Ravens has averaged 31.4 targets, 22 receptions, 241 yards, and 1.8 touchdowns over a whole season. As Walker is coming into an offense which saw Lamar throw the ball more than ever before in a season for more completions and more yards, I think we will see fairly similar numbers. Now, last year's 4th wide receiver, Nelson Agholor, saw more yards, completions, and touchdowns than any other 4th wide receiver before him, but Agholor is a 9-year veteran, not a rookie, so his performance may have inflated the average a bit. For Walker, I can see his offensive production looking something like 35 to 45 targets, 20 to 30 receptions, 200 to 300 yards, and 1 to 3 touchdowns. It's not quite clear yet what kind of role Walker will have in the 2024 Ravens offense, but a lot of that will depend on his and Lamar's chemistry, the development of Walker, and whether or not his playstyle will fit the deep threat hole that we saw in the Ravens offense last year. With the 5th and 6th wide receiver position very much in flux at the start of camp, I don't feel like an attempt to project those numbers would be helpful, let alone possible. I'm very excited for this year's wide receiver core and for Lamar to continue growing in this offense, where his intellect and arm talent are just as important as his elite athleticism. If Zay can stay on this trajectory that he's currently on, and Bateman can turn into a true number 2 receiver, I think this offense can be extremely dangerous, especially when factoring in the talent of the Ravens' tight end position. I hope you guys enjoyed this video of my wide receiver projections, and I hope I did a better job than last year's. Either way, if you guys did enjoy it, please hit that like button, subscribe if you're new, and comment down below your projections for the 4 wide receivers that I spoke about in this video. As always, guys, stay safe out there, and go Ravens.